Chapter 118. Shizun sometimes falls for tricks too. Moran had a shadow. He wasn't dead. A panoply of little details flashed through Rong Jiu's mind. The shock would have sent a chill up his spine and a rush of hot blood to his head to scramble his thoughts if he weren't already dead. Rong Jiu stood unmoving for some time. The way a person reacted to unforeseen events often had to do with what they were accustomed to. For instance, some people's past experiences made them habitually jumpy, and they would freeze up at the first sign of the unexpected. Then there were people like Chu Wanning, darling of the heavens, who was self-possessed and difficult to ruffle, unfazed by just about everything. As for Rong Jiu, who had wallowed in the mud all his life and suffered every manner of hardship, his immediate thoughts were, did it pose a threat to him? And if not, how could he benefit from it? Within seconds, he realized, first, that Moran was a living person who had snuck into the underworld, and second, that he stood to gain much from this knowledge. He merely needed to expose Moran, and he'd have done the underworld a great service. Such an achievement would undoubtedly land him an official position of some sort, and from there he would strut about with his chest puffed out. So what if he had sold his body in life? If he seized this opportunity, he could at least move up in the world as man out in death. The opportunity was practically handed to him on a silver platter. Why bother with reincarnation? He could skip all that and secure a comfortable life without delay. It would be a complete upset. He would erase all his past disgrace and start fresh. Rong Jiu's peach blossom eyes narrowed subtly, and something flickered within. He could see it now, being bestowed positions of import and titles of nobility, sitting behind draped silks on a bamboo sedan chair like those officials in the underworld, a picture of poise as he floated above the throng of ghosts below. The more Rong Jiu thought about it, the more gleeful he felt. There was just one problem. He was weak and delicate, and there was no way he could sneak out from under Moran's nose to go tell on him. He'd need to keep Moran occupied. The gears in his mind turned, and his gaze fell on the red-robed Chu Wanning. "Chu Tianchen!" Rong Jiu greeted Chu Wanning and took a seat next to him, his cheek propped in his hand. Chu Wanning continued to probe at the barrier without so much as a grunt of acknowledgement. The man was so cold, Rong Jiu could practically see a layer of frost on his closed lashes. Rong Jiu tried again. "Still nothing?" A few moments passed. Chu Wanning still didn't reply, but neither did he chase him off. So Rong Jiu sat and chattered idly about this and that, as if talking to himself. Eventually, he muttered in a soft voice, "To tell you the truth, Chu Tianchen, I wasn't completely honest with you earlier. There's something I was afraid you'd look down on me on if you knew, that you would harden your heart against me and leave me behind." Chu Wanning's pitch-black brows were drawn tightly together, and though he had yet to speak, a flame of anger burned between them. He was still maintaining tight control, restraining himself from letting it out. But how could Rong Jiu possibly miss that flickering light? "I was thinking it over while I was outside," Rong Jiu said in his delicate voice. "I feel so terrible about lying to Shizun, so I wanted to come say sorry." As luck would have it, his opener just so happened to match Moran's. Both of them wanted to say sorry. Chu Wanning wasn't even that repulsed until Rong Jiu opened his mouth and came out with these words. He finally, slowly opened his eyes and, keeping his gaze trained on the wall, asked in a frosty tone, "Which brothel did you work at when you were alive?" Rong Jiu was caught off guard. Tianjin already knew? He stole a glance over at Moran and swore internally. To think that guy had actually come clean on his own. Would it be enough for Rong Jiu to fan the flames like this? Mo Xianzhen and I... Chu Wanning cut him off. I said, which brothel did you work at when you were alive? Rong Jiu bit his lip. The Immortal Peach Pavilion in Black Bamboo Town. Immortal Peach Pavilion. Chu Wanning repeated the name with a wry tug of his lips. Though he said no more, his expression was terrifying. Rong Jiu snuck several glances at him. Then he pursed his lips and ventured. You don't look down on me, do you, Chu Tianzhen? Chu Wanning did not reply. I lived a hard life and had a feeble body and was sold to the brothel very young. If I had a choice, of course I'd like to be a demon-slaying hero like Tianzhen too. Rong Jiu sighed wistfully. It'd be wonderful if, in my next life, I could become an outstanding person like Tianzhen. Reincarnation won't change the nature of a soul. Chu Wanning said, impassive. My condolences, but you and I belong to different walks of life. Even after being shut down like this, Rong Jiu's smile didn't falter in the slightest. I know I could never compare with Tianzhen, he said, lowering his gaze. It was just wishful thinking. When it comes to people like me, if we don't give ourselves something to hope for, a dream to cling to, we wouldn't last a year in the brothels before plotting how to end it all. No response. Rong Jiu glanced at Moran out of the corner of his eye, checking to make sure he was out of earshot of their little chat. After all, he continued with a soft sigh, the guests at the brothel were so often cruel and callous, they hardly saw us as human. In a place like that, receiving a visit from a kindly guest like Mo Xianzhen was a thing to be envied. Chu Wanning remained silent, but the veins on the back of his hand stood out where it was pressed against the wall. Had he still possessed his powers, there would undoubtedly be 5 holes in that damn wall right now. He seemed to struggle with himself for a long moment. Finally, he asked, voice dark and low, "What's there to be envious of?" A trace of affection blossomed on Rong Jiu's gentle, lovely face. Not too much, not too little, precisely the right amount. That Mo Tianzhen is a good person, of course, although he might have erred and stolen from me in the end. I can only imagine it's because I served him poorly in the past. He'd always been such a reasonable, charming person. Chu Wanning's face was cold and indifferent as he listened without a word. Everyone who ever served him at my place mentioned how good and kind he was. We always looked forward to his next visit. After a long pause, Chu Wanning asked, "Did he go often?" Rong Jiu feigned a dry laugh. How often is often? I'm not quite sure how to answer Xianzhen's question. Then tell me how regularly he went, for whom he asked, and when his last visit was. Those thin lips were like a pair of knives, and each question glinted with a cold, dangerous light, as if aiming for Moran's life. Rong Jiu pretended not to notice the frosty gleam in Chu Wanning's eyes. Embellishing liberally, he answered, I really didn't keep track of how often he came, but I used to see him at least 10 days a month, if not more. As for whom he asked for, it varied. Rong Jiu sighed. It's all in the past now, Chu Tianzhen, so please don't hold it against him. I asked when his last visit was. By now, Chu Wanning's face might as well have been one thick layer of ice. Answer the question. Moran, in fact, had never gone back to see Rong Jiu after the day he'd been reborn, nor had he visited any other brothel. But Rong Jiu took one look at Chu Wanning's expression and knew the truth wouldn't do. He feigned uncertainty and stroked the flames some more. I'm not sure, but I do remember seeing Mo Xianzhen around the brothel now and again, up until the time I died, so probably around then. He had barely finished when Chu Wanning shot to his feet, pulling his hand from the wall so that his white sleeve fell over his slender fingers. In the murky dark, his eyes blazed with sparks, and his entire body trembled. Rong Jiu was privately delighted. The skillless Tianjin was too easy to fool. Rong Jiu was a prostitute, a veteran in the arena of love affairs, an expert at reading the feelings of others. Baiting someone so virtuous and upright as Chu Wanning was child's play. He had him hook, line and sinker. Rong Jiu had carefully prepared a nervous expression, and he deployed it now. "What is it, Chu Tianjin?" he asked anxiously. "Did I say something wrong? They're all misdeeds of a previous lifetime now. Please, don't blame Mo Tianjin. He's not a bad person."
"Like I need you to tell me if he's a bad person or not."
Chu Wanning snapped. He shook with fury.
"If I want to teach my own disciple a lesson, what business is it of yours?"
"Chu Tianjin." Chu Wanning ignored him completely. A chill emanated from his gaze, even as sparks flew from the rage that blazed in his eyes. Rong Jiu attempted to block his way, but Chu Wanning shoved him aside and strode over to the door of the storehouse. He grabbed Moran by the back of his collar and yanked him to his feet. Moran looked back, startled.
"Shizun?"
Chu Wanning retracted his hand, as if even the collar of Moran's robes was too filthy to touch. He stared his disciple down like a cheetah on the hunt, growling low in his throat and preparing to pounce. Yet even after several long seconds passed, he was still much too angry to speak. What was there to say at this point? If Moran hadn't reformed even after his public reprimand on the platform of sin and virtue, if he had apologized and acted like a decent human being before Chu Wanning all this time, but was in truth still sneaking off to this or that peach parting pavilion or cut-sleeve lodge to fool around with prostitutes. Moran had no idea he'd been slandered. All he saw was the darkness on Chu Wanning's face, his expression one of anger, revulsion, and, though he wasn't sure if he'd imagined it, stifled sadness.
"Mo Wei-yu, how many of your words were truth, and how many were lies?"
Chu Wanning's voice was hoarse, and his lashes quivered. After a second, he said lowly,
"You really are vile by nature, beyond remedy."
Those words were like a boulder crashing into the ocean, churning up a massive wave in its wake. Moran flinched violently. He stumbled back 2 steps, shaking his head, staring at Chu Wanning in dismay. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. Those were the words Chu Wanning had spoken in his past life, when he'd lost all hope in him. Why would he say that now? Wasn't everything going well? Moran had no idea what had happened. He flew into a panic. He tried to speak, but Chu Wanning cut him off, the rims of his eyes growing red, as anger blazed through his gaze like wildfire.
"How long do you plan to lie to me?"
he asked, voice raw. Moran's mind was in chaos. What lie? What had Chu Wanning learned? Moran had too many dirty, unspeakable secrets. Faced with Chu Wanning's terrifying glare, he didn't even think to suspect that this was Rong Jiu's doing. Chu Wanning stepped closer, and Mo Wei-yu stepped back. He retreated farther and farther until his back hit the wall. Chu Wanning came to a stop before him. A long interval passed as he stared at Moran's face. When he finally spoke, there was a tightness in his Shizun's voice, like he was choking back a sob.
"Why do you want me to come back so badly? So you can keep lying to me, angering me, leading me by the nose? I thought you'd turned over a new leaf, Moran. I thought you were worth teaching, that you had changed for the better. I thought I could teach you to be good."
He closed his eyes slowly. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice,
"Incorrigible. Shizun, get lost."
Moran fell silent.
"Which part of get lost do you not understand?"
Chu Wanning's eyes flew open, his gaze frosty.
Who were you? You disappoint me. How can you expect me to pretend I know nothing, to go back to the world of the living with you?
Moran's heart clenched. Heedless of Chu Wanning's anger, he grabbed the wrist within that billowing sleeve and shook his head, begging with teary, reddening eyes.
Shizun, please don't be angry. Tell me what happened, okay? Whatever I did wrong, I swear I'll change. Just please don't chase me off.
Change. That's what Moran had said back then too. And had he? If Chu Wanning hadn't met Rong Jiu here, would he have ever found out about these unseemly deeds? It was said that concern will make a person rash. Chu Wanning was usually calm and collected, but he had a fiery disposition and acted on emotion when it came to matters of the heart. On top of that, Rong Jiu and Moran had, by Moran's own admission, shared an improper relationship, and Rong Jiu's performance had been so convincing that Chu Wanning had fallen for it completely. Unable to pull free from Moran's grip, Chu Wanning lifted his other hand to summon Tianwen in anger. Of course, nothing appeared. He was mad enough to keel over. If he wasn't already dead, he would have been spitting blood. Suddenly, there was a brilliant scarlet radiance as Moran summoned Jiangui. He pressed the willow vine into Chu Wanning's hand and knelt before his Shizun. His other hand remained firmly wrapped around Chu Wanning's wrist. He was scared to death he might leave.
Shizun, I know I have done plenty of things that made you angry and upset in the past, but since coming down to the underworld, every word I've said has been true.
He lifted his head, eyes brimming with tears.
All of it was true. I didn't lie to you.
Chu Wanning clenched his hand around Jiangui. His heart burned with rage, yet at the same time he felt unbearably pained. Moran's fingers were wrapped so tightly around his wrist they trembled uncontrollably, despairingly, but refused to let go. His agony was so palpable it nearly pierced the depths of Chu Wanning's soul. How could he possibly not feel it?
If Shizun is upset,
Moran continued,
if Shizun can't forgive me, then please strike me, yell at me. Anything is fine. And if you really don't wish to see me again, if you think I'm vile by nature, beyond remedy.
Moran's voice broke on that phrase. He bowed his head where he knelt before Chu Wanning.
If Shizun really doesn't want me anymore.
He didn't want Chu Wanning to see him cry, but he couldn't stop the shaking of his shoulders as silent tears soaked the ground beneath him.
Then I'll leave Xisheng Peak and never show my face before Shizun again. But please, I'm begging you.
His forehead was nearly touching the muddy ground where he knelt, but his hand still gripped Chu Wanning's wrist so tightly, so stubbornly, as if he'd sooner die than let go.
Please, don't leave.
Chu Wanning was silent.
Shizun.
Chu Wanning closed his eyes.
You promised you'd come back with me, so please don't leave.
Chu Wanning's chest ached. He was only a fragment of a soul, so how could he still feel like his heart was being stabbed by knives, scorched by flames? His eyes snapped open, shining with anger and resentment.
I promised you? Then what about what you promised me? Back at the platform of sin and virtue. You said you'd seen the error of your ways, and then when you knelt in Clear Sky Hall, you said you'd never do it again. So why didn't you keep your word? Did you really think I wouldn't find out more were you? That I wouldn't discipline you again?
Moran started. He raised his head in a foggy haze of confusion and looked up through tear-filled eyes.
What?
The word had barely left his lips when Jiangui flashed out, bright and scarlet, tearing viciously down the side of his face. There was an eruption of crackling sparks, and blood splattered across the ground and the wall. Chu Wanning was incandescent with rage. He hadn't held back a whit. A bloody gash opened on Moran's cheek, bleeding profusely, but he paid it no mind as he clutched at Chu Wanning's hand.
"What do you mean, the platform of sin and virtue?"
he asked, wide-eyed.
"What about Clear Sky Hall? What am I keeping from you? What am I lying about?"
His questioning only made Chu Wanning more furious. He tried to shake off Moran's hand again, but his grip was like iron. Moran suddenly realized something was off here. He whipped his head around to look back toward the storehouse. While the two of them were quarreling and completely distracted, Rong Jiu had snuck off. He saw at once what had happened, and his expression shifted.
"Shizun, we fell for his trap. Come on, we gotta go. It's not safe here anymore. Hurry."
He made a dash for the door, pulling Chu Wanning behind him, but they had barely made it 2 steps when Rong Jiu appeared in the distance, leading a group of ghost soldiers. Even now, he was still tattling.
"They're right this way. That living person and the soul that's with him. The 2 of them." "I should have killed you."
Moran roared furiously. There was no time to explain. Moran led the way, holding tight to Chu Wanning's hand as they sped down the streets and alleyways. The number of their pursuers swelled, and the sounds of sentry whistles and clappers rang throughout the palace grounds. Chu Wanning glanced back to see 4 or 5 distinct groups of lanterns stream from the main alleys to gather into one mass, like a hissing snake of fire on the hunt. Rong Jiu's face was fair, glowing with glee, as he chased Moran and Chu Wanning. That frail body of his, weak from years of hardships and abuse, was pushed to its limits. He ran like a famished jackal, bounding after its prey. He truly believed he had earned himself a great credit by being the first to sniff them out and turn them in. Drunk on this feeling of accomplishment, he unexpectedly mustered an aura of command.
"Catch them! Catch the living intruder!"
Someone grabbed his arm mid-stride. Rong Jiu whipped around angrily, then faltered when he saw it was the captain of the guard who had caught him earlier.
"What are you grabbing me for?"
he snapped, indignant.
"Hurry and catch that man up ahead there." "Sure, they're runaways, but aren't you one as well?"
The captain narrowed his eyes, leveling him with a malicious gaze.
I only ran because I wanted to help the 4th Lord catch them."
Rong Jiu shot back, now alarmed.
"I was the one who found the living person. I was the one who discovered Mo Wei isn't a ghost. Don't even think about laying hands on me just to steal my credit before the 4th Lord."
The captain was at first rather taken aback, but he soon put 2 and 2 together and burst out laughing.
"You found him first? Credit? You think I'm here to steal your credit?"
His laughter stopped abruptly.
"How desperate are you for distinction? Have you gone mad? The 4th Lord himself discovered that living person. You think he'd seal off the entire 2nd Palace just to catch some common little ghost? Stealing credit indeed. You must be blind, trying to steal credit from the 4th Lord himself."
In his shock, Rong Jiu stumbled and fell to the ground. He watched as the army of ghost soldiers tramped past him in pursuit of Moran and Chu Wanning. Rong Jiu trembled and his lips quivered as he muttered, "Already discovered? The Ghost King already saw through them? I'm not the first? No credit? All his visions of riches and fame, of being revered and admired by crowds lining the streets, came crashing to the ground to be crushed underfoot by the army stampeding past all around him. Rong Jiu stared vacantly for a while. Then he suddenly flew into a frenzy, straining with every fiber of his being to struggle free. His frail body was like a mayfly, lowly yet unwilling to bend to fate, a moth flying into a hungry flame. His life had never been easy. All he'd ever known was a bed, men, wealthy madams, guests who came and went. A small and windowless room, filled with the scented haze from a brass incense burner, where it was impossible to tell dusk from dawn. That was his entire existence. It was a dark, never-ending night. He only wanted to see daybreak. For the sake of that ray of light, that chance at living, that tiny scrap of hope, he had been willing to abandon his dignity, his body, his honor, his kindness, his conscience. These were all he had. Flying into the flame for that bit of light. Wait for me! Chu Jianzhen, save me!
Seize that runaway. Once this is squared away, have him sent to the Fourth Lord himself for interrogation.
No, no! Rong Jiu's pale, bloodless fingers clawed at the ground, his hair falling loose and tangling into a disheveled mess in the struggle. Under the cold light of the moon, his charming, lovely face appeared eerie and terrifying. His eyes bulged as he screamed incoherently, "No, Chu Jianzhen, save me!" And then, hysterically, "I found him first. I found the living person. Me. You can't treat me like this. You never would have found him if it not for me. You just want to steal my reward. My credit!" The soldiers dragged him away, and his mad shrieks were soon drowned out by the heavy thunder of footsteps.